Today we're welcoming Kiki Giles from the College of Wooster. She's one of our CLS critical language scholars on the site. So Kiki, welcome.
Thank you. So I'm here to talk about the Critical Language Scholarship Program. This is a program run by the Department of State and also by American Councils. And it is an amazing avenue for study abroad because it is a language study program that is funded by the government. And so it's a really great opportunity for low financial cost study abroad. And also there's so many different benefits to gain from it, which I'm going to kind of expand on through talking about my experience within the program. And then at the end, we will hopefully have time for questions. And I can also walk through the application process because part of the reason why we're hosting this session is that the application has opened. And so I wanted to give some more information in case anybody was interested in pursuing this program. So yeah, this is what I'm going to be covering, and let's get started. So my critical language was Arabic. I studied Arabic for 8 weeks in Amman, Jordan, with the Jordan Language Academy. And it was an absolutely amazing experience. I've included a couple photos underneath the text. One of them is when we visited some Roman ruins at the city of Jerash, which I found out is the most well-preserved Roman city in the world. And so there's a whole lot to learn in Jordan through cultural preservation activities, which is really important to the critical language scholarship program. They don't just teach you languages, they also really do immerse you in another area of the world and the culture and the people, and it was fantastic. And next to that photo is us at the largest collection of Palestinian, Jordanian, and Syrian clothing, traditional clothing. It was a clothing museum. So yeah. My experience was largely made up of classes, my language partners, and then our various program excursions. So that's kind of what I'm going to be focusing on. And then you're more than welcome to ask me questions about anything else you'd like to know. So let's get started. So with classes, I had 3 different classes. I was taking Modern Standard Arabic, which is the internationally mutually intelligible variety of Arabic that you would see used at the United Nations, or it's the written variety and also the official variety of Arabic. And then alongside that, I took Media Arabic, which is using Modern Standard Arabic in the context of printed media or things like the news. And so I got to gain a lot of different vocabulary on discussing world events and various important issues that we usually don't get the vocabulary for when we traditionally learn a language. And so I feel I was able to discuss global issues and more politically relevant topics. And then my 3rd class was Levantine Arabic, which is the colloquial variety of Arabic spoken in Jordan. There are about 25 different varieties of spoken Arabic that are used throughout the world. Currently, I'm in Morocco, so I'm learning a completely different form of spoken Arabic. But while I was with CLS, I learned the Jordanian variety. And so my classes went from 9 in the morning until about 2:30-ish. We had about 2 hours of Modern Standard Arabic and then an hour each of Media Arabic and Levantine Arabic, 5 days a week for 8 weeks. So it's a very intensive program. You cover about a year's worth of material in totality by the time you finish the program. So it's great for making huge amounts of language gains because you cover so much and you're able to retain quite a bit because you're going at it so repetitively in such a short amount of time that all you're breathing and speaking and eating Arabic the entire time, or whatever language you go and study. And then to supplement our in-class experiences, we had language partners, and these were Jordanian people of a variety of ages. My language partners were predominantly in their mid to late 20s, but we had students, we had teachers, we had young people who were in the workforce, and they would just come and speak to us for an hour, and you would just speak in Arabic. And you could do your homework with them. You could go to cafes, which is what my friends and I did a lot. And we would sit there and we would play like Never Have I Ever. And we had to figure out how to translate that into Arabic. I don't remember what it is, but like we eventually figured it out, and we like would play Never Have I Ever and tried to supplement each other's Arabic skills. And so that was really fun because it was like I'm learning, but I'm not in my classroom, which was a nice break from the many, many hours of class. And then interspersed with that, we also had some really great program excursions. So for my program in particular, we were limited to what was in Jordan. Like you don't travel outside of your host country. So for my program, we went to the Dead Sea, which was awesome. You can see us bobbing like little corks. It was very, very fun. And then we also went to Petra and Wadi Rum, where we got to see some of the amazing like archaeological and historical aspects of Jordan, which was absolutely crazy. Like you never think that Petra's that big until you go and you see that it's like hundreds of feet tall and you're just staring up at it like, wow. And then I mentioned Jerash earlier with one of my earlier photos and how we went to a lot of Roman ruins. The city of Amman itself actually used to be a Roman city. There are leftover ruins that make up the citadel at the top of one of the hills. And so, yeah, we got to learn so much about the culture, the history, the people, everything about Jordan. We weren't just locked into our language. So move on to my next slide. So now I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about like the general idea behind the critical language scholarship, because it's a very unique program. It's in the summer. Anybody from any major or field can go and do CLS. I had a cohort member who had just graduated from the University of Alabama who had majored in computer science. And she was still there learning Arabic. Like there is no discrimination between whether or not you're going into meta studies or global or international studies. Anybody can go learn this as long as the language is something that matters to you. And it's fully funded by the US government. Everything is paid for except for your passport, which can get very tricky with the visa process, which I will talk about when I talk about the application process, because that was a time to figure out. Yeah, here's a picture of my friend and I in Wadi Rum on this slide. That was a fun trip. It was very hot. Would definitely recommend wearing closed-toed shoes in the desert. These languages are usually not very commonly taught. But like I said, the whole idea behind the Critical Language Scholarship Program is that you're learning languages that are critical to the United States interaction with the rest of the world on an international level. So you truly become like a global individual because you get to see another part of the world, you get to learn an important language, and it really opens up a lot of doors for if you're considering working on any kind of international level in the future. Regarding the languages, there's 14. Some of them have no experience required. And then, like it shows on the slide, some of them have prerequisites. Arabic, Korean, and Russian, I know, require a year's worth of prior experience in the language before you go, before you apply. And then Chinese and Japanese require 2 years. But like the competition is equally distributed amongst those that have no experience required and those with some prerequisites. So don't feel discouraged about applying to any of these languages. Like you're going to have an equal opportunity to do so. And yeah, so I mentioned it was fully funded. This is everything that's included. And yeah, so yeah, your visa gets paid for, airfare, housing and meals. I didn't have to pay for my textbooks or anything. That was all just mailed to me and I just brought it with me to the program site. Everything was taken care of. And while I was there, we had a stipend that was allocated to us to help pay for our meals. Due to COVID, we were living in hotels as opposed to homestays so that we could keep the people in Jordan safe. We didn't know how COVID with air travel was going to work. So we were given the funds to feed ourselves, to take care of laundry and like any essential living costs. And our program was like really amenable to helping out financially if like something came up with your stipend or anything like that. So it's really very financially supportive. And Yeah, so my experience in my program is very similar to what almost any student in CLS goes through. You get the 20 hours of language classes, cultural activities, which happen on a weekly basis. You go to places like the clothing museum that I mentioned, or you'll do things like calligraphy or learning how to do a type of dance. Like we learned how to do Debka, which is a Jordanian line dance, and we actually performed it at graduation. And so you get to do these really fun like cultural activities, which are really great, and weekend trips. And then, yes, with the application, you are applying for a language. The reason why they clarify not a country is because some languages like Arabic have multiple institutes at which they have set up a program. So Arabic in particular, we have 2 institutes in Morocco, and we have 1 in Jordan, and we have 1 in Oman. And so when you apply, they divvy the students up across the locations. As far as I know, there's no rhyme or reason as to how they do it, but they do try to get like a pretty even spread of different ability levels within the cohort. I knew some people who have been studying Arabic for like 10 plus years and were really good at it, and other people who were like, I just did my first year, like me. And so we had a really good spread of different skills, and we were all really able to help each other and grow, which was really nice. We do have a language policy. We had to speak in our target language the entire time that we were there, which while it sounds exhausting, you do get used to it pretty quickly because like your teachers are really only speaking to you in your target language. And so when you're doing classes in only that language, it starts to be the one that you're relying on the most. And so I would be talking to my cohort members in English, and then I would slip into Arabic because I was using it so often that that became easier at times. And so, yeah, it's a pretty, it can be difficult, but it is super, super beneficial for making the gains because you get to practice it so much more. And then, yes, like I mentioned, I had a language partner. Everyone had a language partner. That is honestly one of the most important aspects of it because you actually get to make connections with people from your host country and do more of those outside of the classroom practices.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, what's up?
Who is in charge of the program in the country? Who runs the program in
Yeah,
those countries?
so every program, every cohort has what's called a residency director. And this is somebody who's employed by American Councils, who's one of the co-providers of the program with the State Department. And this is an American person who comes with you. Mine's name was Casey Poe. He was a cool dude. He had been a residency director 2 or 3 years before my cohort, and he is who handled all of our medical concerns if anybody got sick, any housing or financial things that we needed to cover, and he generally like supervised us from the viewpoint of like making sure that we had like an administrative presence that wasn't just our host institution. Because outside of classes, our host institution like wasn't terribly involved. Casey was who was doing that on the day-to-day. So yeah, you do have a representative with you. And yeah, so this slide has a lot of what I have already mentioned. One thing I do want to say is the alumni network is super fantastic. I had several members of my cohort who were veterans, and now I'm a member of the alumni network, and it's been so great to be able to talk to people who are further along in a career that you might be interested in, that your target language might help you get towards. You really do get to make a lot of different connections across the states and across students who've been there, but also through their connections with their host country. And like, I could connect people with my teachers in Jordan if they really wanted to talk to somebody about like learning Levantine Arabic or something like that. And so there's a lot that we can learn from each other, and joining this community was like really fantastic for me, especially somebody who's considering a foreign career. So yeah, that was amazing. Yeah, so like I mentioned, every academic discipline is considered. There's really nothing that could ding you in this application. As long as you like really do show that like you want to learn this language and that this language is important to you and like how it specifically fits into your goals. Like I found that everybody who I was with was like, I really do plan to use Arabic in this way. Like it was something that was very central to their goals and what they wanted to be doing. Yeah, so if you want to know more after the upcoming Q&A session, when I was applying, Candace was an amazing help. Thank you, Candace, for being an amazing CLS advisor at Wooster. And I know that ABED is also a CLS advisor now, according to the website. So both of them will have amazing resources for helping you cultivate the application and figuring out exactly what you want to do and who you want to talk to. And the website also has a bunch of links to old information sessions and different processes about like the application, getting your visa, what the program looks like. There's a lot that you can like piece together in case you do need a more in-depth review. And then here are some other additional study abroad resources in case you want to explore other opportunities, either like after CLS or instead of. But yeah, Fulbright is very popular. I have a friend from CLS who's now also in Morocco on a Fulbright. I just saw her a few weeks ago. And so, yeah, like it's a really great introduction to other federally funded study abroad programs because they're so well provided and they make it a really great experience. So that's it for me. Do we want to do questions and then I'll go through the application process, or do we want to do the flip side and I'll do the application process first? See what we want to do.
Do you have any questions?
We have questions? All right, great. I can't hear your end very well, but I think we can do this. We got this.
Kiki, maybe on one of your earlier slides, there was something about getting preference. I know that Benjamin Gilman scholars later can get preference when applying to other U.S. government-related jobs and whatnot. Does CLS provide that too? Okay, there you go.
So the program benefits. So I don't think it says it here. Yeah, so there's the vague statement of you do get an advantage if you have a language like a critical language, but CLS specifically promises that if you complete the program and you do all of the program requirements, you will receive a letter of non-competitive eligibility. And what that means is when you go on to, if you go on and you want to pursue a job in civil service, like domestically within the federal government, and you apply for a job and you're being evaluated and somebody holds your application alongside another person's application, if you guys are equal in every regard, but you have a CLS, you will be in a more preferable position and you are more likely to get the job. Like you get another boost to your eligibility for jobs in civil service. And if you do this, I actually just had to do this process. If you are midway through college, like when I did my CLS, you can defer your letter of non-competitive eligibility until after you have graduated. Typically, it's applicable for the year after you've done the CLS. But because there are students like me who do them in like the middle of their schooling, they have now made it where I think you can defer for up to 2 years before you can redeem it to try and do a job search. So yeah, and I also want to point out there is no sort of mandatory service or anything you have to do after completing a CLS. For scholarships like the Pickering or the Wrangle, which are for like graduate programs, there's a mandatory period of doing foreign service work, but for CLS, there's no post-program requirements other than filling out a survey about about your experience. So yeah. So do we have any other questions?
Application process.
Application process, yes. So this was part of the reason why we're holding the information session. The application for the CLS program is up. It has been open since the first week of October. It closes the 15th of November. And when I was applying, I decided to apply to Arabic, and I had to do a 2-page statement of purpose where I outlined exactly how Arabic was going to help me. And for my particular angle, I am doing my independent study research on Morocco. And I was going to be in Morocco for the full academic year, which I'm doing now. And so I was able to really hammer home that Arabic was going to give me a lot of essential skills to be able to successfully study abroad and also pursue my academic goals, which made it really central to like who I am as a person and as an applicant, which really does help. And then you get 4 short answer questions, which are about different characteristics that you embody within the program. Like when you're a CLS, like when you're a critical language scholar, you are a citizen diplomat. You are there to do cultural exchange and to be a representative for American interests. And so they'll ask you, like, how are you going to engage with your host community? How will you show your resilience, and like how do you adapt to new situations? And they really want to see like how you're going to function in an intensive language school environment overseas, because it is a very different environment. And then you also provide academic info. So if you're applying to a language that requires a prereq of 1 or 2 years of prior study, I had to send in transcripts from my prior study of Arabic, which was at a different institution. And then I also had to provide my general classes, and I also had to get a letter of recommendation. You need 1. You can only have 1. So make sure that like you think that through. I accidentally asked 1 more recommender that was necessary and then had to backtrack and be like, I'm so sorry, I misread that. But yeah, and then when you're done with all of your short answers and you've sent in like your demographics info and your transcript and everything, you then wait for a while. I sent in my application at the end of October last year, and then I found out about the semifinals round in January. There's 2 rounds. You get a semifinals round where they let you know in January if you're going to be considered for the scholarship. And they don't tell you like any kind of info about your placement. They just say like, hey, we're going to take your application into the next round. You'll hear from us in a bit, and you go on. And then I found out that I had been accepted in early March. They told me you got accepted as a critical language scholar for Arabic. And then they also tell you your placement, which is different depending on what language you're applying to. Some of them only have 1 institute that you could possibly go to. Others have multiple. So for mine, they had to send a secondary email because there's 4 different institutes that I could have gone to. Initially, I was accepted into the virtual institute in Oman. They were running a virtual program there due to COVID. And then I was lucky enough to be offered a spot that had opened up for the in-person program in Jordan. And so I was able to switch over. That did introduce other parts of like just the general process of going on the critical language scholarship program, which is you do have to obtain a visa depending on what country you're going to. Some countries like Morocco don't really require a visa if you're going to be in the country for less than 90 days. But Jordan required that we were going to be on visas. And so I had to fill out a visa application. I had to get a passport photo done. I had to send my passport with the form and the picture to the Jordanian embassy, and then they had to send it back with the visa. And so like that is something to like keep in mind, is like having a passport at the time that you're doing all of this will make your life a lot easier, especially if you're going to an in-person institute. And then I also had to get a physical done. That's very common, especially because they want to make sure that everyone's going to be in peak physical health. And so I had to get signed off by a doctor to make sure that like I was going to be okay health-wise going abroad. I had to declare what medications I was going to be on, because some things that we prescribe in the US are illegal in other countries, especially when it comes to any kind of mental health medications. Like that can be an interesting thing to figure out. And so it was definitely a process. Like you don't finish when you get your acceptance. Like there's definitely still steps you have to do. And then I also wrote a post letter so that they could evaluate my written proficiency in Arabic. And then I also had to do a placement test, which was all about seeing how good I was at reading and how good I was at the grammar. And I also had to do a oral proficiency interview, which is where you do a phone call with somebody who speaks the language that you've been accepted to. And it typically only goes for like 20 to 40 minutes, but you talk with them on the phone. And they assess like how good you are at speaking that language on a worldwide scale. It's the ACTFL, and I don't remember exactly what the acronym stands for, but they're a internationally regarded organization that evaluates language proficiency. And part of this is to evaluate how, like, where you're at so they can place you into your classes for CLS. But this also provides you with your pre and post program evaluation, because you're going to do a second OPI at the end of your program to evaluate how much progress you made during CLS. And then that OPI score, you can just give to employers to show that you have this measurable amount of proficiency in that language. So you do get like a actual certificate at the end of it that shows like, this is the level I have achieved in the language, and you have something you can show that is very official. Yeah, so that's like the whole process. It's a lot, but like if you just like buckle down and do it, you can usually get it done pretty quickly. But were there any other questions?
Well, Kiki, I would just say that even though it is kind of a lot, your study abroad experience this summer was probably worth about $10,000 or $11,000. So
Yeah.
if you think about, you know, if it took you 10 hours to apply, you're getting paid really, really well for those 10 hours.
Yep, like to put it into preference, my airline tickets alone probably would have been about $4,000.
Wow.
Like the State Department does get some deals with that because they can make deals with the airlines, but yeah, like a round trip ticket to Jordan and back, like it's not a small amount of money. And then they also paid for us to live in a very nice hotel for 8 weeks, and they gave us a stipend that had more than enough to feed us for 3 meals a day. And like, yeah, it's a very well worth it, and you really do get like a lot of the incidental costs of study abroad just completely taken care of. Yeah, and the textbooks are not cheap. I can confirm that. But yeah, no, does anybody have any kind of questions or anything I can clarify?
I'm wondering how they make it a real cultural experience if you do a virtual CLS. Because remember when you first found out it was virtual, it was like, okay, well, that's great. But when you knew that you were going to be able to go to Jordan, of course, that was even better. Do you know how they make the online programs cultural in nature?
Yeah, so one of my friends, the one who's doing a Fulbright here, she was a virtual critical language scholar in 2020, so like height of the pandemic. And her institute actually went the route of a lot of guest speakers and extra conversation hours to speak with Moroccan people, to get lectures from Moroccan intellectuals. And so that was kind of how they bridged that gap. But I will say it's nowhere near being able to go in person, because it's really difficult to miss out on being able to visit different sites. Like if I had been virtually in Jordan and not been able to go to the Dead Sea or Petra or Wadi Rum, I think I would have been devastated. So it is a different experience, but I think soon enough, like the virtual institutes are going to be pretty rare, if not gone, because COVID's now improving a lot in the country. It's like, I don't think we had more than maybe a couple dozen positive cases in the country of Jordan while we were there. And we didn't have anyone test positive in the cohort until the very last week. And thankfully, it was a student who wasn't coming back to the States. She was going to do further traveling. But yeah, no, it's a very safe program. They do a lot for COVID. And yeah, I'm really hoping the virtual institutes will give way to being in person again.
It would be hard to do the language pledge on a virtual program.
Yes, I don't know that everyone's parents would be cool if you came out of class and you were like, let me only speak Arabic with you now for the rest of the day. Yeah.
Hey, so where do we find the application, Kiki?
Yeah, so let me put the link in the chat for this meeting so it can be distributed, but you can go to clscholarship.org. And there's a big flashing apply now button. And that is where you can find the application link and portal, and you'll make an account and you'll click what language you're applying to, and you'll start filling that in. I also want to mention that CLS recently launched a new program for Arabic, Chinese, and Russian for anybody who's interested but doesn't have prior language experience. It's called CLS Spark. You can also find the info for this program on the same website. CLS Spark is a virtual academic year program where you take language classes on a weekly basis. It's presented like 2 or 3 days a week. They give you a $300 stipend to mitigate any cost of like getting technology, or you don't have to pay for books. Everything's provided in that regard. But when you do this program and you finish it, you are automatically put as a semi-finalist for that language for the following summer. And so it's, yeah, you just do it in the fall semester. It's not an academic year program. You do it in the fall semester, you finish, you get marked as a semi-finalist, and then there's a very good chance you could go on a CLS that following summer as a member of the cohort, even if you don't have the whole like year's experience outside of doing Spark. So that's a really good option for people who are in those languages that require more experience, who just haven't had time to get that experience. So yeah.
Languages.
Exactly. I'm not completely sure.
So what's key is the critical languages are languages that the State Department and the US government feel like we don't have enough people learning them. So Spanish isn't considered a critical language. Kiki, do you want to go back to the slide that had the
Portuguese,
language?
however. is
Portuguese,
another
yes.
language
Yeah.
thing, you know. But yeah.
Yes, so to kind of give a little bit of context as to how this came about, the US government hit the 2000s, and especially after 9/11 realized that we did not have a lot of native speakers in a lot of languages that were going to be necessary, especially for interacting with regions such as the Middle East or other areas, like especially Russia, right? Like Russian right now is a very critical language for international relations. And so every year the languages are reevaluated to see what is going to be kept and what has been determined to be less critical. This year they removed Punjabi. It was available last year as a language, and now it's not. But yeah, no, these are the languages that have been identified as critical need for how the US interacts with the rest of the world that we don't have enough people speaking.
And so few universities offer classes in many of these. Azerbaijani, maybe the University of Minnesota, they have
Yeah.
44 foreign languages they teach, but you know, pretty tough to get language.
Yeah, I don't know any school where anyone's learning Indonesian.
Or Bangla.
Exactly. Yeah, no, so these really do fill a gap in what's currently commonplace in US education. And that's one thing I really like about the fact that this program is fully covered, is that there's no cost to you for trying to go study a rare language. Like you're very well supported in that endeavor.
Any other questions or thoughts? Kiki, we want to thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again on November 2nd, 3rd?
3rd.
November 3rd at 11.
Yep.
All right.
Same time, same place.
Yeah, same time, same place. Well, we so appreciate you doing this and
Of course.
it's really nice for me as an advisor to hear about your experience, and that will help me give better advising to the next student who pops in and says, hey, I'm thinking of wanting to do this program.
Yeah, and if anybody like wants to talk to me about it now that I've had the experience, I'm more than happy to be put in touch with any students that are interested. Like Candace, you have my email, so anybody that wants to talk, I'm happy to spare a few minutes to kind of go over any details.
Thank you, Kiki, for your help today and for sharing this information.
Yeah, not a problem. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
You're a great ambassador.
Senior year, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna be a GEO ambassador. I have to do it now.
Okay, all right.
All right.
Okay.
Have a great rest of your day, you guys. Thank you to the people who showed up. I appreciate your time.
Please,
Bye-bye.
friends
Bye.
who you think might be interested, let them know, because November 3rd, we're doing it again. Or, we can forward them the recording.